Go get the seeds. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the garden. If you're new here, my name is Kat. I am a suburban gardener growing on a quarter-acre lot here in New Jersey. And today, I'm very excited to talk to you about choosing the seeds to plant in your garden for the 2024 season. It is here, my friends. And if you couldn't tell, I am extremely excited. When I sit down and choose my seeds, I typically use these three different guidelines or categories that I put the seeds in. The first one is all about practicality. These are fruits and vegetables that I know my family will eat that we should definitely grow again. So classics like zucchini, tomatoes, cucumber, green onions, lettuce, staples in my garden. The second category or kind of guideline I use is plants for pollinators and also for birds or anything else that you want to attract to your garden. Typically, these are going to be flowers. They're going to be things like sunflowers, zinnias. Even though those are flowers that typically attract your pollinators, you might also want to think of herbs in that category. I'll expand on that later. The last category that I use when I'm thinking about seed selection is obviously my favorite. We kind of go overboard here, but the fun category, right? Things that are new, things that are exciting, things that you've never grown before. Leave space for that in your garden. I think it's really important to have some fun in the garden and something new and exciting to look forward to. So if this is your first time gardening this year and you're really trying to narrow down what it is that you should grow, what I think you should do as a first step is to open your fridge. That's the easiest way to figure out what fresh fruits and vegetables your family is actually going to consume, right? So I'm gonna out myself and we're gonna take a look at my fridge right now and see what I've got going on. Carrots, lettuce, cucumbers, got some tomato, onion. I've got broccoli in here too. So just by taking the time to actually verify what does my family eat, what do I know that if I grow we're gonna use, you're able to really narrow down that list of fruits and vegetables, right? If your family is also a big fruit eater, think things like blueberries, strawberries, grapes. It might be worthwhile to consider growing that fruit and giving it a shot. Personally, I planted a Concord grapevine last year and it took off and went bananas in one of my raised beds. I also planted over 100 bare root strawberries for my kids, and we've got blueberry bushes that I am going to buy and plant this year. In the first few years, they really don't produce a lot, but once you guys get the hang of it and the plants get established, you guys will have backyard fruit for decades at that point. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm writing down the vegetables that I know we're going to eat. So I've got lettuce, green onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, what else? Carrots were in there. Now, even though they weren't in there, I know we're gonna eat things like zucchini, spinach, arugula, basically a salad blend, right? I wanna make myself a spring mix salad blend. Now, if you've had experience gardening, you're probably thinking to yourself, Kat, it's way too early to start these heat-loving vegetables, things like tomatoes and peppers, your nightshades. And you're right, but that doesn't mean we can't make the list now, because what we're gonna do after we make this list is we're gonna look at our vegetables and we're gonna say, okay, which of these are spring vegetables, cold-loving vegetables that I can start now, and which are the other ones that I'm gonna wait maybe a few more weeks and start at the beginning of February. Plants for pollinators. If you're trying to attract things like butterflies, you're going to want to have a large landing pad. That's what they prefer. So flowers such as sunflowers and zinnias and things like that are wonderful at attracting butterflies. Anything daisy-like with a nice broad 3-inch flower will typically attract butterflies. Another type of flower are clustered flowers. So things that have small flower heads, but there is a lot of them so that the entire flower head ends up being wide. These are things that if you think of cilantro or parsley, when they go to seed finally, they create these clusters of very small flowers, but large landing pads. And these will also attract things like predatory wasps, because those wasps will then lay eggs on those hornworms that keep eating your dang tomatoes. So you want to attract them. You want to have these large landing pad flowers in your garden, signaling to your pollinators, your predatory insects, your birds, I am open for business. Come on down. Help me save my garden from all of these different pests. So I'm going to write down a few of my staple flowers on this list and make sure I start those seeds. Last but not least, plants for fun. This is where I let myself just kind of go through my seed collection and pick a few that just speak to me. I am going to limit myself to five different seeds that I will start just for fun, because I have a huge seed collection and I don't want to start too many things this year. I really want to focus on having a productive garden and not having to throw out plants that I have no space for. So the 5 plants that I decided I would grow for fun this year, I'm going to try to grow the striped Klondike blue ribbon watermelon. We're going to try this really funky, warty kind of squash, just for fun. And then spaghetti squash. We're not huge spaghetti squash people, but it'll be fun to try to grow it. And then the Mexican sour gherkin, or the cucamelon. This was popularized obviously by Jess over at Roots and Refuge, and I've never grown it, so I'm gonna give this a shot. And then eggplant. I haven't grown eggplant in a few years. We don't really eat a lot of it, but it's such a beautiful plant, and I figured, why not? Let's give it a try. Now with eggplant, I typically have a big problem with flea beetles, but I haven't grown it in about 2 years. So I'm gonna start a few plants of both of those seeds, because the seeds are old, so I'm just gonna give it my best shot and we'll see what we get. All right, friends, so I hope that those general guidelines helped you when you sit down and choose your seeds. Let's recap which plants we can start now in the spring and can tolerate cold temperatures. Anything in your allium family, including green onions, as well as storage type of onions or big, large, bulbing onions, you should definitely get a head start on now. That way, you'll have large onion sets that you can go ahead and transplant out once you're about a few weeks before your last frost. Other things that you can start now that can tolerate the cold are things like parsley and cilantro, even oregano, any herbs, because sometimes they take up to 12 weeks to actually get large enough for transplant size. So I would say start those now. If you're gonna start greens for your garden, you can definitely start those now. Things like lettuce, kales, spinach, arugula, any type of collard green or mustard green that you want to start for your garden, they can typically tolerate those first frosts. Do not start any of these on a heat mat. You want to make sure that they are acclimated to cold weather conditions and normal conditions before you transplant them out. I am not growing cabbages this year, but you could also start any of your brassicas as well. Things like cabbages, Brussels sprouts, broccolis, all of these can be started now. This year, am going to be growing Piraceacapa broccoli again. That is my favorite type of broccoli to grow. It is a sprouting broccoli, and it does fantastic. It lasts throughout the summer as well. It is a heat-tolerant broccoli, so I start that and I get broccoli throughout the entire year. I will not be growing more kale. If you already know, I've got kale that's overwintered in the garden. We have had a huge a huge whitefly problem on most of my brassicas, so I will be moving back from brassicas this year in general. But they're fantastic plants and I encourage you to grow them. They're fantastic cold weather tolerant plants, so if you're thinking about starting those, get an early start on them so that you have good sized transplants once it's time. You should sit down with your seed packets and double check what they suggest as far as your seed starting timeline based on when you're going to have your last frost date. You can go ahead and Google when your last frost date is in your zip code and it should pop up. For instance, ours is typically towards the end of April, mid to end of April. Now, things like cold weather crops for spring though, you can start putting those into the ground before that last frost date, because they can tolerate those frosts. So the spring garden is sort of the refuge for the crazed gardener of wanting to start again. So I get so excited about spring vegetables and being able to start those seeds.